the International Consortium for Social Development, and the International Council on Social Welfare. I'm pleased to welcome you to this discussion on development of social work in post-Soviet countries. But let me say a couple of words about why this topic matters. Authoritarian regimes have the effect of discouraging civic engagement and may oppose a profession like social work, which is focused on social problems, because this implies that life may be less than perfect. Joseph Stalin in the Soviet Union spoke of creating the new Soviet man, a propaganda image that left little room for people with problems. The profession of social work was not allowed. When such regimes expire, it becomes impossible to develop or redevelop civic and organizational capacities to address family and community problems and help families and communities reach their potential. Social work can again emerge, though it is starting from scratch and resources may be very scarce. The task is daunting. Today, we will hear how social work education and professional practice are built under these conditions in two post-Soviet nations, Azerbaijan and Ukraine. Turning to our panelists, Aytakin Huseynli founded the Azerbaijan Social Work Public Union and continues to serve as its chair. Aytakin has been instrumental in establishing professional social work in Azerbaijan. She worked to found Azerbaijan's first social work education programs, the master's and bachelor's programs in social work at Baku State University, where she also has taught. She currently teaches a course at Azerbaijan Diplomatic Academy, and she is a doctoral candidate in social work at the Brown School, where she also earned her master's degree. Aytakin has worked with the government of Azerbaijan on reforms to the nation's child welfare system and on children's policy, and I know in other areas of public policy, including women's issues and domestic violence. She's been very active, not only developing the profession, but serving as a very important leader in social work practice in her country and deinstitutionalizing children who are in the child welfare system. She also serves as on the editorial boards of the International Social Work Journal and the International Journal of School Social Work. Dr. Nataliia Gusak is an associate professor in the School of Social Work at National University of Kyiv-Mohyla Academy. An expert in training social service providers and in organizational development, she has collaborated on numerous international projects, including work with the United Nations Development Program, with UNICEF, and with the World Health Organization. She is a member of the International Military Social Work Consortium and the Institute of Health Visitors in the United Kingdom. Dr. Gusak has extensive experience in teaching courses on social work and social research in the Ukraine and in Ireland. As a Fulbright scholar, she is currently conducting research at Wayne State University in the United States on collaborations among social service and health providers. Our speakers today will each speak for about 20 minutes, leaving some time for questions and discussion. If you have a question, please submit via the chat, and I'll be monitoring the chat during the program. And we probably can't use everyone's question, but we will at least be able to use some of them for discussion toward the end. We turn now to our first speaker, Aytakin Huseynli.
Hello, everyone. It's my great pleasure to be here today. Thank you very much for my colleagues, our school, to give us this chance and to present today development of social work in Azerbaijan and to talk about contribution of myself and my colleagues. And I'm really glad that today it's really also encouraging that my professor, my academic advisor, Dr. Michael, is also moderating this session. It's honoring. And so I just want to say that I am alumni of Brown School in 2004. Upon my graduation, went back to Azerbaijan before my doctoral program and joined my colleagues, other alumni from Brown School and Columbia University, and contributed to the development of social work profession and education. And in today's presentation, I will share with you pathway of social work development and also findings of the qualitative study, which I did with my actually mixed method study, which I did with my colleagues to evaluate the current situation of the social work. But before going to just talk about my history of social work development and findings, I want to ask you a question. And do you imagine any societies without social work, or do you know any society? Do you think of any society which societies which do not have social work? You can put your answers to chat, and so I'll give you a couple seconds to think about it if there are any societies. So I'll check chat to see who's the winner, if I may. So whoever answers yes, they are the winners. Congratulations. Yes, there were or still are societies or countries which do not have social work, and post-Soviet countries were among them. So for a long time, most post-Soviet countries didn't have social work, and currently it is either they don't have, or it is infancy, very new profession for society, and they are not those who are delivering social workers actually, even though they exist. So in most post-Soviet countries, social work started developing after 1990s, which is after the collapse of the USSR. So, and also currently development of social work in today varies depending on post-Soviet countries, because during Soviet time, even now, although 15 countries of under USSR, although they were kind of by theory, they were all the same. But of course, there was variation in development, in investments between Central Asian Soviet Union countries, South Caucasus, and European, we call them Soviet countries. And because of that, and today, development is also varies, and social work development, of course, also varies. But after 1917, so while USSR existed for 70 years, there was not social work, but after 19th, it started developing and coming back, and it's coming back. We can discuss in 3 pillars. First pillar, if we look at the literature on development of social work, it is first pillar covered the relief and crisis intervention kind of work, and mostly by international community, and mostly international community were donor organizations. So everyone rushed in to help these countries to help with increasing the welfare of people after the system of basically whole economic system, whole system crashed down, social protection, social welfare system broke down. So first pillar from 1990s to 2000 covered that relief and crisis intervention. Second pillar, starting from 2000, the country started with the help of the financial institutions to rebuild the social welfare protection system, which were broken before. And there was a lot of focus on special vulnerable groups. And one of those vulnerable groups were children. And there was a huge call, big call by UN agents, especially by UNICEF, to reform child welfare system, to eliminate or transform these huge child protection institutions with community-based and family-like services. And then many countries, post-Soviet countries, started training of parasocial workers or social workers to work with children and families to move forward child welfare reform. And third pillar is about the education of the social work, and almost all post-Soviet countries started establishing the national programs of social work education, which didn't exist before Soviet Union. And again, development of education varies between countries. I think Armenia started first at Yerevan State University, then followed by Lithuania, Estonia, Ukraine, Georgia, Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and so on. Currently, I could say that almost all countries have their national program of social work. So why didn't it exist? Why during the Soviet time there was not social work, you may ask? Because communists banned it. They took over in 1920s due to its religious roots. because like in Western countries or in countries where it started emerging, they had the roots on religious or private charity, which was against the philosophy of communists, so they banned it. And they also decided that in USSR, there is no social problems. That's why we don't need people who are working with social problems, including social work, of course, not only social work, but other human behavior or other professions which were about helping people. They were in the blacklist for a long time. And of course they were social problems, but they didn't want to recognize it. For this reason, social work didn't exist during Soviet times for quite some time. And of course, education also didn't exist. Like many other countries, post-Soviet countries, Azerbaijan also has history of philanthropy, which kind of origin of the social work, kind of might be origin of social work if it existed during Soviet time. There was a philanthropy started, and in Azerbaijan, philanthropy started with local and elite, political and intellectual elites, and philanthropy charity system, like organized charity. There was organizations like National Marifs, Shafas, all this kind of organizations started from the 90s. Before Soviet took over, they were focusing to help poor families, especially with education access, helping children, and trying to promote women's rights. For instance, Muslim Women's Committee, it was a women group. They were focusing mostly on children, establishing shelter for children, for migrant workers in oil fields, because before Soviet time, Azerbaijan, Baku was a huge oil industry, and there was about 200 private local companies, and it was attracting a lot of migrants from neighboring countries, and there was a lot of children of or families of these migrants, oil workers, needed help. And again, as I said, Muslim Social Democratic Group, for instance, women who were the wives of the intellectuals and oil barons, we say, oil millionaires, they were raising question of maternity leave for women, time on job for nursing, for women to nurse children, medical care for all workers. This kind of questions they were raising before Soviet time. But then when communists took over, they banned all this, and all these women, all these men, they were sent to like concentration camps, work camps, or gulags, we say them, to Siberia or to Kazakhstan, or they were shot dead. And all with this, I would say philanthropy or social work, initial roots of social work kind of, or social protect local kind of social development was kind of abolished. And during Soviet time, another question, so what existed during Soviet time? Who were doing all this? So all this work, social services delivered by volunteers or members of trade unions or Communist Party. And it happened because social work viewed as a charity, and it viewed that everyone could do that. There was also a social assistance, still social work in our country. We are struggling, competing with that, I wouldn't like profession, which is basically social assistants without college degrees, secondary education. They are helping old people with household chores, with cleaning. And during Soviet time, they were kind of considered social workers, and they were kind of delivering social services, but mostly social services in social agencies. Social protection of social welfare agencies were delivered by anyone except social workers. It could be philologists, historians, anyone. So, and of course, social work education didn't exist in post-Soviet time. So, as I mentioned earlier, international community rush team, they started training their people for their own subsection of the social work. In a couple countries of post-Soviet countries, a couple countries like Georgia, Azerbaijan, I believe Moldova. In addition, having this collapse of the whole system, like overnight system collapsed, so you had job, next day you didn't have job, you had savings, next day you didn't have savings. Couple countries, including Azerbaijan, also had another issue like war. So Azerbaijan started receiving about 200,000 refugees, 800,000 IDPs from countries from this region. And so international communities focus were mainly on helping to refugees and IDPs, and a lot of, I would say, for social workers or social workers may be trained to help these people. In 2000, Open Society Foundation opened a social work fellowship program where they started training professional social workers, and they collaborated with Barra Brown School at Washington University and Columbia University, training us. I am one of those fellows. As I mentioned earlier, 2004, I graduated with the support of Open Society Institute and went back. So in 2002, Azerbaijan had first professional social workers with social work degree, master's degree. And in 2005, we alumni went back and all together established first social work education, master's degree. Then in 2008, first bachelor degree at Baku State University. So we decided in 2017, we decided to assess what is the situation of social work until then, and what are the achievements and what's missing. So we did a mixed method research, but today a question for our research was, what was this current situation of social work? What are the achievements and what are the major challenges? So we conducted in Azerbaijan. So this is Azerbaijan. If you can see, it's a little country here, and our neighbors are Georgia, Russia, Turkey, the Caspian Sea, and Caspian Sea. So at Azerbaijan, Azerbaijan is 10 million, has 10 million population. It is upper middle income country. We are oil-rich country, and country can be proud that literacy rate is very high, as you see, about 98 or 97, sometimes 99. So our key informants were people who are either are involved with social work in some capacity. We had about 39 participants for our study. We collected information from survey, interviews, and focus groups, but today I will just present you findings from interviews and focus groups. We covered almost all big cities in Azerbaijan, Baku, Ganje, and Nakhchivan. In those cities, we also have social work education, universities which are delivering social work. So we used thematic analysis approach to analyze the data. So what are our findings? Okay, and in addition, we took Weiss's Gall and Bilbron framework to have a guideline, for our assessment in order to evaluate the situation of social work against some criteria. So this framework by Weiss's Gall and Bilbron, they suggest that social work, in order to be called a profession, they need to have all these 8 criteria, like public recognition, should have effective professional organization, codified ethical standards. The profession also needs to have professional monopoly over specific type of work. So all these 8 criteria they suggested in their framework for profession to be called profession. And we evaluated to see which one exists in Azerbaijan in terms of in social work. Our findings, so some information who were our key respondents, mainly alumni, master degree students, bachelor students, people who work in NGOs and government and social work teachers or administration officers who works in social work programs. Findings, we found out that although social work started very new, I would say new, but it has a couple good achievements, that 10 schools offering social work education on all levels. And there is one 9-month diploma program, which certifies, I would say, child and family social workers who are in the field to work with in child welfare field. And 2012, there was a law on social services, not on social work, but social services, but it recognized social work as a profession. There is one big chapter which talks about what is social work, what is the difference between social assistance. We could achieve that to put there, but there is a difference between social worker, who is a professionals with minimum bachelor degree, and there is a social assistant who doesn't need to have any college degree, but works in helping people with household chores. And in 2012 and 13, we could succeed to put together and get adopted competence standards for social workers. And we have one professional organization, which is called Azerbaijan Social Work Public Union. We found out that there is a rapid development. Institutionalization of social work goes slowly, but it's moving. And there is also wide acceptance by policy makers when they understand what is social work actually. So, but we also found out some challenges. I will talk a major of them here. So by the way, these are the pictures of not the respondents, but random active social workers who are moving the profession forward, young social workers, or I would just say gender of all of us and young in terms of professions that are new, moving the social work forward. So challenges, what we found out. First challenge is the wrong image of social work. And here is the quote from the respondent. To give about 10 minutes talk about my profession, which means social work. When people ask me what do I study, when I say I study social work, they respond, I see, you are the ones who distribute pensions and cash. In this case, I have to spend quite a bit of time to explain that no, we do more than that. It is really a bit frustrating, but at the same time, I understand that it is a new profession and it will take some time for people to fully understand it. This is the major problem with one of the major problems. Another problem is that social work jobs are not for social work graduates. I wouldn't say that there is a lack of jobs, places for social workers. I think in our country, we have enough government and non-government agencies can employ our alumni. But the problem is that they don't see need for it. For instance, in agencies that work with social issues of families, they hire graduates from philology, economy, agriculture, history majors, whereas those positions need to be given to social workers. Social workers are the professionals who should work with social issues of people, not historians. These issues create an unemployment for our social workers. So unemployment was also raised and one of the issues among social workers. Another issue is about the low salaries for social work positions. I mean, many people complained about that. They say that position is not get paid well. Another problem is uninformed selection of social work by prospective students. In Azerbaijan system, admission system is centralized on bachelor level, so people don't consciously choose social work, but they just end up with social work degrees sometimes based on the point they obtain during the exams. So this was another issue raised by everyone, by bachelor degree students, by let's say people who are hiring them or are teaching them, that there is an uninformed selection of social work by prospective students. But master students didn't raise this issue. They said that it was conscious decision and we are happy we have chosen this profession, and actually they stay in the profession. But bachelor degree, they are when they graduate, they massively leave the profession. Either they get degree in another field or they choose another job. So what we recommend based on our research is first to, again, based on the experience of other countries and also based on the framework with I've mentioned before, adopt a legal framework on social work to strengthen its public recognition, like a special law on social work, establish monopoly, and strengthen social work education, and also give a good salary to increase its prestige in the society. I think like in all other countries, people in Azerbaijan also, they deserve high quality services, social services delivered by professional social workers. So it's important to kind of put together all these criteria in order to have professional social work in Azerbaijan. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Aytakin. That was an excellent presentation. I know we don't have much time. You packed a lot into that discussion. Wonderful. We turn next to Nataliia Gusak, who will also talk about the development of social work, but this time in Ukraine.
Thank you so much. I would like to continue Aytakin's presentation because I believe a lot of questions have been already mentioned related to post-Soviet countries at the beginning of 1990s. And I'm really grateful for all organizers, for all participants to be able to participate in this webinar. And I'm also grateful for Fulbright program, for outreach lecturer fund of Fulbright program, to help me to present everything that we have in Ukraine about the history of social work development. And currently I'm a Fulbright scholar at Wayne State University, and I'm really happy to have an opportunity to share Ukrainian experience with my colleagues in the United States. So I would like to cover today some key facts about social work development in Ukraine. And before that, I would like to share some facts about Ukraine. And on the right of this slide, you see this heart of social work. And I'm proud that in Ukrainian, it's in the middle of this heart. It's just above the social work. It was this heart, I believe all of you are aware that this was created by International Association of School of Social Work. And it means that there are so many countries where social work already exists. Even there are some countries that they have no social work at all. And few words about Ukraine, because I'm not sure that all of you are aware with a situation in our country, but it's located in the eastern Ukraine, and is one of the largest country within Europe. And talking about Ukraine, nowadays we are involved in armed conflict and in the eastern Ukraine, and you see the territory of Ukraine is really large, but now according to our governmental, we lost almost 7% of our territory due to annexion of Crimea Peninsula by Russia Federation in 2013, and due to armed conflict in the eastern Ukraine. And it's a big challenge for development of social work as well. But I will talk a little bit more about this. Some facts about Ukraine that you might not be aware with. As most of post-Soviet countries, we are independent countries since 1991, and our language is Ukrainian. That's why we are really careful when someone calls the Ukraine but not Ukraine, or Kyiv instead of Kyiv. So we are really careful about this. And a few facts that might be helpful for understanding the development of social work about the minimum salary, that it's about or around $2,000. And due to this military conflict that's still ongoing since 2014, we have about 1,600,000 of internally displaced people across in Ukraine. And that's a big challenge for social work as well, for social workers. Starting in 1990s, in the context of social work development, as Aytakin already mentioned, there was no social work as profession before 1990s. And I saw in the chat there was a question about social pedagogy. Yes, social pedagogy was well developed, but it's again a big challenge for social work development in post-Soviet Ukraine, because there was like different understandings between the difference between social work and social pedagogy, who are responsible for what. And in 1990s, we inherited a universal system of social welfare focusing on social benefits. However, in 1990s, as you know, number of vulnerable people significantly increased in post-Soviet countries, and there was limited resources to pay social benefits. That's why the question was raised, who can help to respond to the needs of vulnerable population? And one of them, or those people who were able to respond to these needs, were social workers. And we inherited also the different governmental institutions were responsible for social work functions. And among those were Ministry of Labor and Social Policy, State Committee for Youth, Ministry of Internal Affairs, Ministry of Defense, and Ministry of Health. And all of them were responsible for small functions related to social work. as in all post-Soviet countries, there were numerous governmental inpatient institutions and limited number of non-governmental organizations involved in service provision. That is why also social services and all roles related to social work was covered by governmental institutions. However, there were a lot of charity, volunteering movement, and self-support for vulnerable population. And some of them created their own NGOs in 1990s and later. About the first step for social work development, on the right of the slide, you see the first book was published about social work. And if we'll translate the social work, this book, it's called like the title of the slide, like Social Work in Ukraine, First Steps. And what were these first steps for social work development? We were really happy that a lot of people were interested in social work development, including civil servants, practitioners, and university professors. And if in 1994, the question was, what is social work? In 1999, we got the answer that social workers can respond to people's needs and respond to vulnerable population needs. Also, in 1990s, we had a social welfare reform, and instead of universal social benefits, we got this targeted social benefits. And according to new legislation, new groups of clients were defined in 1990s. And as Aytakin mentioned, I believe in Ukraine it was the same, that most vulnerable were recognized like people with disabilities, children, mothers, families, elderly people, war veterans, and the victims of Chernobyl disaster. It was specific group, vulnerable group in Ukraine. In 1990s, numerous social services were developed in the community, and first of them were like around 500 centers for elderly, and they were located in community, and they provided services for people where they were living. Also, there were almost 400 of centers for youth and families, and they were also outpatient services. But this organization, well, again, it was governmental institutions. And in 1992, the first training for social workers was presented in Donetsk. In Donetsk is the eastern part of Ukraine, where now we have this still ongoing conflict, armed conflict. And I'm proud to be alumni of the first School of Social Work established in Ukraine in 1994. And it's a School of Social Work named after Volodymyr Poltavets. And now we have in this School of Social Work master program since 1995 and bachelor program since 1997. And currently we have around 600 alumni, so we are not really big school, but we are the first professional school of social work. And now we are the members of several international organizations like International Association of School of Social Workers, European Association, and East European Sub-Regional Association. It means that we are implementing this international approach to our to teach and train social workers in our school. Covering all these areas that was already mentioned by Aytakin about professionalization, all these eight key areas, I would like to say about our main achievements and challenges in these areas. And first, if we talk about social work legislation and policy and recognition of profession, we have not special law on social work. However, social work definition was provided by a law on social work with families, children, and youth. And you see there, this definition was changed twice. And the last one sounds like you see in the slide is like professional activity. And we are really proud they add the word professional, because before that it was like an activity of organization to provide services or something like that. Now we are proud that it's recognized like a profession. However, like in most of post-Soviet countries, social work in Ukraine is focused mainly on social services provided by qualified and non-qualified staff. If we talk about qualified, we talk about bachelor and master in social work, and non-qualified, it's like volunteers, chaplains, or anyway who can provide support. And we have in this if in the service provision, we are mostly focused on this law on social services, and there are 43 standards for social services, including such like counsel, social care, assisted living, or crisis intervention, and all of them are really standardized. It means that if we teach social workers or in our educational institutions, they already know how to provide the service, but there are many non-professionals who are involved in service provision as well, but they call themselves like social workers. We also, it's like an achievement, we have social work supervision for public institution. It's formalized and recognized. We have a special regulation for this. We have developed ethical principles since 2003. And it was these principles based on international ethical principles in social work. And we are really proud that we introduce evidence-based principles to social work policy. And a lot of projects introduce this new area for social workers, like, you know, social commissioning, social entrepreneurship, human trafficking, and forced labor, and several laws accepted our research data on these issues and our practice. Talking about public recognition of professional status, it is officially recognized and included in the state registry of profession since 1999. And in Aytakin's presentation was mentioned that there is the social assistant and social worker. We also had such experience until the last year or last 2 years. And after that, the social workers were divided in 3 titles: social work specialist, social worker, and social manager. And these titles are conceptualized in our law on social services. Also, occupational standards for 3 these titles developed. So we now have more titles for social workers, not like only social assistant, a social worker. We have social work day, and we celebrate this day on the first week of November. And I'm really happy that this year I was able to celebrate this day with United States social workers in Orlando, where the Council of Social Work Education annual meeting was held. And we have we have professional association, and it was created in 1992. However, it's not really active currently as an association for social workers, because it's not, this association do not protect social workers, do not develop any protocols or standards for social workers. And during the research that Aytakin had in Ukraine, it was, she can confirm that this association is not really active. So we are still like in between. Formally we have it, but in fact it doesn't exist. We have no licensing, registration, or certification for social workers in Ukraine. About employment issues, that it is also a challenge, like it was mentioned in previous presentation. However, nearly 140,000 persons working for the state, and they call themselves social workers, but most of them do not have special education in social work. Some of them are social pedagogues, some of them are philologists or people from other specialties. So most of them are not social workers by training. And if we talk about public settings where social work can be employed, there are several ministries and their governmental institutions under these ministries, but again, not it's not like required to be a social worker by training to be employed like a social worker there. We have a low number of social workers in public institutions, and you see there is around one social worker per 100-150 clients, so it's not so recognized in these institutions. And unfortunately, we have no statistical data on number of social workers in NGOs. But in some areas, NGOs cover most of services for vulnerable population. And in Ukraine, it was developed and well-trained social workers for NGOs providing services for people living with HIV, for children and youth as well. About the salary, it's one of the lowest in our country for social workers. You know, the minimum, if you remember, the minimum salary is around $200. If you talk about salary of for social workers, it looks like the same, up to $200 or $300 in a governmental institution, in public institutions. I can say that we have the most achievements in social work education, because after 20 years of subordination under sociology, social welfare, and etc., and social pedagogy as well, since 2016, social work became a separate area of knowledge in the Ukraine, and we were really proud about this, because in 2016 it was recognized 3 cycles of education for social workers, including BA, MA, and PhD program. And national standards for all 3 levels were developed and accepted. And now we have over 80 high educational institutions and college, both private and state, that ensure social work education. And you see the number of students are really high in these educational institutions. However, we have lack of field practice supervisors with appropriate education and experience in social work. And we have limited hours for practice in social work in our educational curriculum. So we have achievements, and at the same time, we have some challenges in social work, in education social workers. And social work tailor-made courses based on a rise of social issues. Of course, we have some general courses, some courses related to numerous vulnerable population and specific groups. But every year we develop different courses and address the needs, the current needs of population. And it's about human trafficking, social entrepreneurship, IDPs, monitoring and evaluation social program and project, international social work, LGBT issues, etc. Also, we have in education, we have social work certificate advanced training for practitioners, educators, and researchers. And it's quite popular in Ukraine. I will not repeat all this framework for analysis of social work professionalization, and that was already mentioned by Aytakin, but I would like to stress for some challenges for social work professionalization in Ukraine. What challenges we have for now? We have new groups of clients due to ongoing armed conflict, and there are IDPs, veterans and their family members, and PTSD survivors, and not all our social workers are trained to work with these people. We still have ongoing social and health system reforms, and you know, there is a lack of understanding of the social policy reform and the strategy, how we'll provide services. And of course, we have like challenges because of decentralization and deinstitutionalization, and there is no clear understanding between health and social care and how these areas can be linked in terms of service provision and social work. And we have lack of social work occupation regulations. There is existing only accreditation of education programs, not of practitioners. And
clinical social work is not recognized in Ukraine. We have only social work generalists still in Ukraine. And I can say that we have not active professional association and professional community in social work. I can be sure about this because we had several seminars and webinars trying to combine all these different social workers together, and it was not successful. And how we see, or how me and my colleagues from National University of Kyiv-Mohyla Academy, how we see priorities for development social work, it's to do social work research, and it will be like the key in building local knowledge base, and it will be enhancing academic capacity. Of course, there is study in the field of social work education and practice to fill this gap between practice and education in Ukraine. It's developing and introducing military social work and clinical social work in order to react to the current need of our vulnerable groups. And it's about creating national association for social workers as well. And here you see some references of articles being written by my colleagues from National University of Kyiv-Mohyla Academy. And of course, I will be really happy to answer your questions even today, or you can send me email to this email address, and I will be happy to answer questions that I am aware about. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Nataliia Gusak. That was an excellent presentation. Both really wonderful presentations, and you packed as Aytakin did for Azerbaijan. You packed a lot of information into a short space of time. So we've learned a lot, but we still have a few questions coming from the participants in the audience, and so I'm gonna take the liberty to speak for them, and I've picked out the questions that I think might be really helpful since we have such a short period of time. The first question is from Manohar Pawar, who's the president of the International Council on Social Development, one of the co-sponsors of this event. And Manohar asked the question: How has the United States or other countries supported the development of social work in Azerbaijan and Ukraine and elsewhere? I know both of you also work in other countries in your part of the world. And how does that happen? And what was useful, and maybe what was not quite so useful? And what do you need? So I'll whichever one wants to take it up first, please do.
I will, if you don't, Nataliia, don't mind, I will go first. As I mentioned earlier, that United States, like maybe, I don't know if it's still Open Society Foundations constitute the United States, I would say had a contribution in terms of training professional social workers. I can speak for Azerbaijan. The alumni, me and other people who were trained in the United States, for instance, I would say for Georgia too, maybe, and the kind of training first, giving an opportunity with scholarships, to these people. Get training and go back and kind of replicate what's happening in these countries in terms of education, in terms of professional organization, in terms of other milestones for institutionalization of social work. I would say this is the biggest piece kind of approaching to development of social work, I would say from sustainable way, in terms of coming and doing those work for people in those countries, but rather than putting there people who could do this work for themselves. So basically this social work scholarship jointly sponsored by Brown School and Columbia University. And I heard a couple other people also went to other schools, but they're not majority. One way, this was the contribution of United States so far, and so there was one study done, I think, supported by USAID. They evaluated social work. I think it was 10 years ago, to see what is the country, like what is the situation. That might be another contribution. This is so far. This is our things I know so far. Maybe there are other things I am not aware of.
In terms of Ukraine, in 1990s, it was more. United Kingdom was involved in development social work in Ukraine and Canada, and there were two different schools in Ukraine adopting different models of social work education. But however, after that, I can say that the United States has an impact as well, and especially if we talk about Fulbright program, because I see there is among participants, our Fulbright scholar and Dr. Michael Cronin, who was last year in Ukraine, and he helped us a lot in developing social work in emergencies. And he teaches this course, and he was doing his presentation a lot. So I can say that Fulbright scholar helped us a lot, and I am a Fulbright scholar as well now. So that's about contribution of United States.
Thank you very much. I'm sure there are other countries involved as well, and will be in the future. We're happy to hear the United States is at least trying to do something constructive in that part of the world. We take that as good news. Let me ask a more practical question. So the members of the audience have been wondering how social workers are trained, and then Nataliia, you mentioned that they had a salary of $200 to $300. We interpret that to be a monthly salary, if that's correct. So,
Correct.
Is this enough money? And this question is for both of you. Can a trained social worker earn enough money to support a household, support a family, or is this not very easy to do? Aytakin, you want to? You go first.
Yeah. Well, findings of our study also showed that the social workers who are actually employed and earn, it's not enough. So low salaries for social workers came up one of the issues in Azerbaijan. It's not enough. So I'm not very familiar with the minimum salary right now. But we are minimum salary for country. By the way, in our countries, salary goes by months, not by year. It's like when we say how much you earn, we just basically, when we give the figure, it's a monthly figure. So I'm not sure about the minimum salary yet, but this is also for the reason that social work is viewed as something like social assistants, as I mentioned, who do not have college degree. Like if a person graduates from secondary school, if they do something for that level, their salary is low, and social workers is still confused with that profession. That's why salary for social workers is also low. It's of course for that money, even for Azerbaijan, living standards may be different for Ukraine and Azerbaijan in terms of geographical location. It's not even enough for Azerbaijan as well. I would say low salary is a challenge for social workers. Like their salaries is low, and it's a challenge for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can say that in presentation I mentioned the salary for for social workers employed in public or governmental institutions. However, it varies if we talk about non-governmental organization and governmental. In NGOs, they can earn a little bit more or much more. It depends on the NGO. And those who, and sometimes it doesn't matter about education, because if you talk about the level of education, bachelor or master degree, there is no huge difference sometimes in salaries. And even there is a PhD. So that's why it's a challenge. Why do we propose master level degree if the salary is almost the same. But it depends, it varies from institution, and in NGOs it's a little bit higher. Microphone.
Sorry about that. So another question related to the development of the profession and workers. Bikash Kumar raises a question that that in the United States, the current workforce goes largely into clinical social work and care management, because this tends to be financed or reimbursed by insurance companies. And there's not as much support in terms of salaries that are available for social work people who will go into social development, working on poverty, and we could think of other expansion of that categories, doing policy oriented social work. So do you see support for this kind of social work? In other words, not clinical social work, but more what we would call macro social work. It's not a very good description, but social work on large scales for social development in your countries.
Nataliia, this time you go first.
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand if I understand the question correctly. So in terms of clinical social work, we have not clinical social work at all in Ukraine, but most of our social workers by training, they are involved not in direct service provision, but most of them involved in management of social program and projects in different levels. So I can say that this area is developed, but clinical social work is not developed at all.
And similar situation in Azerbaijan, we don't have clinical social workers. I mean, general social work itself trying to find its niche, like prove itself or to give itself in a place, first of all. And even training, I don't know how about in Ukraine, in training still concentration, it's basically general social worker. Even in, we also raised, I have another paper about it, written a paper about it. Also, like, there's not much concentration in master's level still. So we are discussing that too. Sometimes that depending on the university, bachelor and master's curriculum might be the same. And generalists, generalist social workers. Mostly social workers right now involved in child welfare field or child protection field. Mostly is kind of, as I said, because of its history, there was a call 10 years ago to reform child welfare system, and a lot of push for that, training for that, because of that. And there is a lot of work in child welfare. So social workers mostly are practicing in that field. Again, I wouldn't say that there is a majority here. Majority is just bachelor degree graduates and generalist social workers. Couple social workers, small group of social workers trying to specialize in peace building, like conflictology, I would say, mediating, peace building. Right now, there is a huge discussion, and we also raise it. Our association, I myself also raise it. We talk about it, promote social work. We had the second war within 30 years. A lot of people affected, like a lot of veterans, a lot of families of survivors. We're promoted type of the social workers could work with this group of people, train special work, as Nataliia mentioned, with different kind of traumas, survivors, to support not only from mental health perspective, but generally support them to a comprehensive level, like from different, like holistic approach, not just giving them money, cash, which is very popular type of service in a part of our region, but just having like a full package of social services, which is decent, which is more, development oriented. Right now, we are discussing to establish, because in the first war, which happened 30 years ago, we didn't have it. We sometimes call those generation who affected by war as a lost generation, because people didn't get interventions. I mean, there was a lot of reasons. Economy just clashed, just like regime just changed, plus the war, and it was priority was to feed these people, shelter, not just think other developmental kind of services like education, job training, mental health intervention. It was just how to put the bread on their table, like feed them. But now it's different. 30 years past. Last year we had a war, a lot of families affected, 3,000 people, lost, and so many veterans affected and their families. So now we are trying to promote this kind of social work, to work with this group of people. Whoever comes to Azerbaijan, when they talk about social work, like outsider, they say, oh, in Azerbaijan, there is a community development kind of social work. It's mostly focused on poverty, focused on community development. And clinical social worker, we don't have. And it's actually, we felt this shortage in recent, when we had the war. We cannot find a single social worker to train them to work with the families of veterans, families of survivors, and all these services like mental health services, are done with psychologists, clinical psychologists, but not social workers. And because there is no concentration for clinical social workers. Sorry, it's a little bit long. I can talk about the hours and hours. Very interesting, and kind of, when you're also participating in this kind of discussion, you want to share everything, but I know we don't have much time. Thank you.
Thank you, Aytakin and Nataliia. Those are terrific answers. I'm thinking, listening to you, that maybe we also have something to learn from Azerbaijan and Ukraine about doing social work to train more people working in social development. This is a general point that we all have things to learn from each other, even if you're just barely starting out in your countries with social work. We can still learn from your examples. So unfortunately, we have gone over time, and we're going to have to wrap up the webinar. Let me say thanks again to the Brown School's Open Classroom, which is the platform that we're using today, and Janet Gillow and the staff for Open Classroom have been great to work with. The International Consortium for Social Development and the International Council on Social Welfare, who have co-sponsored. So on behalf of the Center for Social Development at the Brown School, which I direct, we thank everyone for attending for this very interesting session, and hopefully we can do more of these kinds of programs about development of social work in some other countries. This one, I think, will light an interest that we can add to as we go along. So thank you very much. Unfortunately, we have to sign off, and we'll see everyone at the next session. And please pay attention to the other offerings that are available on the Open Classroom at the Brown School. There's a variety of offerings, and every week there are very interesting sessions if you have time to tune in and take advantage of this resource. So thank you all.